What is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome to week 5 of tracking trends within fantasy football. Once again, we're going to be going through the performances of players through the first 4 weeks of the season. Let's find out who has that best chance of going streaking in a really good way, or maybe a really bad way. Now, as the season goes on, this is going to help us find those players in fantasy football with the most consistent hit and miss rates. We're trying to find the players who are the safest to start each week. So today, I'm going to be going through quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. We'll be able to determine who's starting off pretty hot and who's just not. Now, on the screen, you're going to be able to see the players' hit rates as well as their average fantasy points per game through the first 4 weeks of the season. Now, obviously, hit rates are calculated on a per game basis, and fantasy points per game is really considered more of a season-long stat. But in case you're wondering, yes, I show them both to you on purpose, because by doing it that way, you're able to see whether they're a little bit more boom or bust or a lot more consistent. For example, if a player is averaging 16 fantasy points per game, but they have a hit rate of only 25%, that means that player is not safe, they're more boom or bust. However, if a player is averaging 16 points per game and their hit rate is 75%, that means they're a lot more consistent. Now, speaking of consistency, I hit on 72% of my player pick'ems on Underdog in week 4. On the season right now, we're sitting at 106 out of 150 picks picked correctly for a hit rate of 71% on the year. So now is the time to jump in on Underdog and play with us this week to see if we can try to do it again. Just be sure to sign up for a new account on Underdog Fantasy or download the app and use the promo code HEADLINERS when you sign up for your new account. If you do that, you're going to get a free player pick and a deposit bonus when you sign up using that promo code. Then every Friday, I put out a show where I break down 6 of my top picks of the week. Now, if you really want to dive into that world, you can become a channel member right here on YouTube by clicking the join button just below the video so you can get access to our Discord where we talk picks all week long. Plus, if you're already in our Discord, you get a massive discount to NextPlay, and all they do is hand out even more picks than we do for all different types of apps. They have super high hit rates, and it's a lot of cheap fun for sure. Now, there are links to everything down below in the description, but I'll also pin a comment so it's easy to find as well. But okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's see how things are looking through the first 4 weeks of the season. Now, we're going to go ahead and start off at the quarterback position, but once again, let me reiterate, I will go through this every single week. In order to be considered a hit or miss at the quarterback position, we're looking at 18 fantasy points per game. Anything above that is a hit, everything below that is a miss. But we'll go ahead and start off right here in the hot category. We have Jackson Dart, Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Drake May, Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, and Justin Fields. Now for Jackson Dart, obviously, he's only started 1 game this year, and he did just lose Malik Neighbors, but his rushing upside could be a huge boost to his numbers. I'm not going to come out here and say he's the safest guy just yet, but through the first week, obviously we see he has some potential in fantasy football. Then Brock Purdy, another guy who hasn't played in all 4 games. So these numbers could change as the season progresses, obviously, but he's only played 2 of the 4 games this season. However, in both games, he's gone over 18 fantasy points. Then we get Josh Allen. Only reason he isn't 100% is due to a blowout victory where they really didn't have to throw the ball for an entire half a game a couple weeks ago. Obviously, nothing wrong with Josh Allen. Then Lamar Jackson. Last week was bad. I mean, bad. We're really waiting to get an update on his hamstring injury to see if this is something where he could miss some time. They have a bye in week 7. And if Lamar actually does have a hamstring injury, do we not see him until after the bye? Because that would be super bad for Baltimore Ravens fans everywhere. Then we get Patrick Mahomes. He's got 23 plus fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games he's played this year, but he doesn't even have all of his wide receivers back yet. What happens to his numbers when Rashee Rice comes back? If he's averaging over 22 fantasy points per game, and he's gone over 18 in 3 of his last 4, getting Rashee Rice back is only going to help. Then we get Drake May. He's gone for 20 plus in 3 straight. Jalen Hurts. The passing game in Philadelphia, it's abysmal. Do you realize that 3 of the 4 games this season, he has less than 155 yards passing in each game? The only reason he's still this high is due to the rushing upside. He has 175 yards rushing and 4 rushing touchdowns. That's what's saving him as of right now. Then Caleb Williams, also up here in the hot category. Week 4 was his first game under 18 fantasy points, but let's give some credit to the Vegas defense. They really held that offense in Chicago in check for the most part. Then Baker Mayfield. His weapons keep getting hurt, but Baker keeps producing. Now we know we have Chris Godwin back, and I know he's not 100% healthy yet, but that production is going to creep up as well, and then we'll get Mike Evans back. With all the weapons at Baker's disposal, he's probably going to be just fine in this hot category for majority of the season. Then we get Justin Fields, and last night, it started off super bad for Justin Fields. It's like he didn't even want to throw the football. But then we saw why Justin Fields is typically ranked fairly high in fantasy football. He just started running all over the place, and that's going to give him a safer floor every single game. Obviously, he missed a game due to concussion, but 2 of the 3 games this season he's played, he's gone over 18 fantasy points. All right, let's go ahead and move down to the guys who are really in the mid category. Guys have, hit 50% of their games, 2 out of 4 so far this season. Daniel Jones. Now, a lot of people love themselves some Indiana Jones based off of what they saw the first 2 weeks of the season. But do you realize that in 4 straight weeks now, his fantasy points per game have decreased? They've only gone down, they have not gone back up. Now that does not mean he's playing bad, it just means that maybe that ceiling we saw at the start of the year is not sustainable. Then we get Carson Wentz in a backup role, solid veteran quarterback, is going to keep producing at a decent floor. Then we got Justin Herbert, and honestly, I'm more concerned about the injuries on the offensive line. What is that going to do to this overall offense? They need to figure it out because their passing game isn't going to be able to be as vertical because he can't hang in the pocket for as long as he could the first few weeks of the season. Then Dak Prescott. And with a bad defense, you better believe that offense is going to have to keep their foot on the pedal to try to win some ball games. Dak Prescott probably going to have some big games in the future, especially when they get CeeDee Lamb back. That's only a help. Then Jordan Love with all of his weapons in Green Bay. Matthew Stafford's doing great with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. They provide him a safe floor each week. Bo Nix has kind of stopped running, which is somewhat concerning, but he's throwing the ball so much better. That overall offense is fairly healthy right now, and Bo Nix probably has some better days coming for sure. Then Kyler Murray in Arizona. Honestly, Arizona is hit and miss everywhere. I don't think that anybody can really figure out what Arizona is trying to accomplish on offense. Now for Kyler Murray, obviously we want him to run more, but that's not something we're seeing each and every week. Geno Smith, his interception total continues to creep up. That's hurting him, but they're also throwing the ball a ton in Las Vegas. Michael Penix. Which Michael Penix is going to show up? One day, he looks like he's never played football before. The next day, he looks like an NFL All-Pro. So I'm going to call him All-Pro to No Pro because we really don't know what's going on with Michael Penix. And then Marcus Mariota in his fill-in role there in Washington has been a decent floor play, but hasn't really shown us much of a ceiling. But obviously, Jaden Daniels is going to be coming back, so we're not overly worried about it. All right, now let's go down to the cold section, the guys who have had less than 50% of their games result in 18 fantasy points or more. This is where we have Jake Browning, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, Spencer Rattler, Tua Tagovailoa, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco, and Cam Ward. Now, Jake Browning looks completely lost out there. He cannot get Jamar Chase going. He cannot get T. Higgins going. He can't get anything going in Cincinnati. Now, if you're asking me, I would love for Jameis Winston to be traded to the Bengals. Can we make that happen, please? Can somebody make a phone call? Now, after him, you see Jared Goff, but he's also averaging 18.1 fantasy points per game. Like we said earlier, he's got a crazy high ceiling, but he's got a super low hit rate, which means it's not consistent. And the reason for that is the running game in Detroit. It can absorb so many touchdowns over a stretch of the season that even though Jared Goff isn't playing bad at all, he's just not needed to go out there and throw the ball 40 plus times a game in order for them to win. Now after him is Aaron Rodgers coming off a decent game there in Ireland. Then Spencer Rattler in New Orleans. They're always playing from behind but really struggling to find the end zone. Tua Tagovailoa Now he does not have Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle is going to have to step up. Darren Waller coming back could be a little bit of a boost in the red zone as well. But then after him, we got CJ Stroud in Houston. Just can't seem to find that ceiling either. Followed by Bryce Young, who has not looked great the first 4 weeks of the year. Trevor Lawrence can't get Brian Thomas Jr. going to save his life. Sam Darnold, this one right here, this one is misleading AF, if you know what I mean, because Sam Darnold has had over like 16 fantasy points in 3 straight games. So his numbers say that he's never gone over 18. But the dude is super close. He is definitely more safe than ceiling when playing for the Seattle Seahawks this year. Then Joe Flacco, it's been a nightmare in Cleveland, we all know that. And then Cam Ward can't get anything going in Tennessee. The final 2 guys, the 2 lowest scoring teams in the NFL, so it's no surprise there. But now we'll head into the running back session. We'll start off with the hot guys first, but once again, just to reiterate, in order for a running back to be considered a hit or a miss, the cutoff we're looking for is only 10 points. Because let's be honest, if you have guys in your lineup that go out and score 10 points every single week, you're not mad at that. So if they score 10 points or higher, it's a hit. Anything below 10 will be considered a miss. And let's start off in the hot category here. It's James Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Travis Etienne, Bucky Irving, J.K. Dobbins, Jalen Warren, Javonte Williams, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Walker, Cam Scattaboo up here in the hot section, and Quinshawn Judkins as well. Now for James Cook, 21 fantasy points per game. He's gone over 10 points in all 4 games this season and has touchdowns in 18 of his last 23 games. Jonathan Taylor, starting off super hot. He is on pace to break his single season yardage record of 2,171, in which he set back in 2021. Now after him, we got Christian McCaffrey, who has 100 touches through 4 games. I don't know if that's sustainable for an entire NFL season. That would be ridiculous volume. Bijan Robinson, we know he's the most consistent guy in Atlanta right now. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's finding the end zone. He's getting work in the passing game. Devon Achane here as well. His role could increase with the injury to Tyreek Hill. Travis Etienne, a huge surprise here in 2025, averaging almost 16 fantasy points per game, and he's gone over 10 fantasy points in all 4 games this season. Now, had Travis Etienne kind of had a downer game somewhere here the first month of the season, I would probably say, all right, maybe this is a little bit of fool's gold. The fact that he's been so consistent, he probably needs to be a weekly mainstay in our fantasy lineups. Then Bucky Irving. Hopefully Bucky is healthy. He had an MRI earlier in the week. At the time of this recording, we have not heard the results. Fingers crossed for Bucky Irving. J.K. Dobbins, man, this guy is exactly what we said he would be in the offseason. We tried to tell everyone when he went to Denver, he's just going to be reliable. He's going to be consistent. He's been one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL when he's been healthy. And now we're seeing it. He's averaging 13.7 fantasy points per game, and he's gone over 10 fantasy points in all 4 games this season. J.K. Dobbins right now is a super safe flex play. Same with the guys after him, Jalen Warren. Now, obviously, week 4 was not ideal for Jalen Warren owners. He got ruled out early morning, so a lot of people didn't have a chance to change their lineups, and that absolutely sucked. Trust me, I'm one of those guys, because I had him in so many player pick'ems in week 4. That one hurt for sure. Hopefully he's healthy now that they're on the bye. He'll come back in week 6 and should be good to go, hopefully. Then we get Javonte Williams up here in the hot section. 3 out of 4 games over 10 fantasy points. He looks the best that he has since his rookie year. Josh Jacobs, no surprise there. He has 13 targets, though, over the last 2 games played, and that right there is totally unexpected. Saquon Barkley has been a lot more safe than ceiling in 2025, and a lot of people want more from him. He has yet to have 100 total yards in a game. He's really being saved by touchdowns as of right this second. Now after him is Kenneth Walker, averaging 12.8 fantasy points per game. He's hitting 3 of his 4 games this season, and we've come a long way since the week 1 panic. Even though Zach Charbonnet is taking away his ceiling, Kenneth Walker is providing a decent floor. Then we get Cam Scattaboo. He's gone over in 3 of his 4 games this year, and with a huge role now and Jackson Dart under center, Cam Scattaboo has a chance to keep this momentum going for sure. And then next up, another rookie, Quinshawn Judkins. Obviously, he hasn't played in all 4 games, but he has hit in 2 of the 3 that he has played in. Plus, he has 44 touches in the last 2 weeks. He is firmly in control of this backfield and almost close to a bell cow role in Cleveland. But let's go down to the midsection now. Here we have Omarion Hampton, Ashton Jeanty, Chuba Hubbard, Kyren Williams, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, Jordan Mason, DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, and Breece Hall. For Omarion Hampton, he has back-to-back huge games. What happened over those last 2 games? Well, there is no Najee Harris. Now, there are injuries on the offensive line, so we're going to have to see Omarion Hampton a little bit more in the passing game in the next few weeks. Then Ashton Jeanty. He had a huge, and I mean monstrous week 4. Will that remain? Because I don't think that's something that we can rely on each and every week. Now, don't get me wrong, Ashton Jeanty has an opportunity to creep up into the hot section, but what we saw in week 4, I wouldn't expect that every single week. Then Chuba Hubbard, he hasn't been 100% healthy. He now has back-to-back down games, but all he really needs is to get healthy and his large role continues. Kyren Williams, he's been a solid running back too. He's still getting a ton of volume. And Blake Corum, even though he gets touches, is inefficient as all hell and isn't really earning more touches in that offense. David Montgomery, a down week last week against Cleveland, one of the best, if not the best run defense in football, so I'm not concerned. Derrick Henry. A lot of people concerned about Derrick Henry, but we gotta remember, his schedule has been absolutely brutal as of late. Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City are some of the best overall run defenses in the NFL, and he's had them in back-to-back-to-back weeks. Now, obviously, we're waiting to find out what's going on with Lamar Jackson, because that will affect Derrick Henry as well. But after Henry, we have Jordan Mason, kind of a down week in week 4, still going to have a large role until Aaron Jones returns. Xavier Scott getting a lot of pass-catching work has really limited the ceiling of Jordan Mason. He didn't get that pass-catching work like maybe we were kind of hoping he would. Now, after him was DeAndre Swift of the Bears. Really hasn't been ceiling, been a little bit more safe to start the year. He's averaging over 10 fantasy points per game. He's gone over that number in 2 of the 4 games this season. Alvin Kamara, him not getting passing work in 2025 has to be one of the biggest oddities of the season. Now, I'm not saying he should be out there getting 10 targets a week, but maybe 5? But no, in 2 of the games this year, he's only seen 2. And to me, I don't understand that. Now, after Alvin Kamara, we got Breece Hall. We saw Braylon Allen get banged up in week 4. Maybe we see a little bit more Breece Hall going forward, and that would definitely help give him the opportunity to get back up into that hot category as well. But that takes us down to the cold section. Let's go ahead and see who we have down there. We got Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, Chase Brown, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, Zach Charbonnet, Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, and Trey Benson. Now, for Tony Pollard, there's just not enough scoring opportunities in this Tennessee offense to really help give him any type of ceiling. He's averaging only 9.7 fantasy points per game and has only gone over 10 fantasy points one time through the first 4 weeks. Then we get Nick Chubb. His job is slowly fading away and going the way of Woody Marks. That isn't ideal. Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, he hasn't been 100% healthy, but he's splitting with multiple people in this backfield. Whether it's Jeremy McNichols, Chris Rodriguez, Debo getting a couple snaps, it's just not the JCM show. But after him is a big name that a lot of people are fed up with right now. It's Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals, averaging just 8.1 fantasy points per game. Only 1 game so far through this season, over 10 fantasy points. This is the Jake Browning effect, and I'm concerned that it's probably not going to change much. Now, the guy after him has a chance to change. RJ Harvey, we saw him with a slightly larger role in week 4, and if they can really include him in the passing game each and every week, he has a chance to move up this list. Now, if anything were to happen to J.K. Dobbins, he probably skyrockets up the list. He's not a name to forget about. Travion Henderson, we finally saw him go over 10 fantasy points in week 4. But my concern here is that there's a split backfield that's so heavy, we probably don't see that consistently. We still have Ramondre Stevenson. We still have Antonio Gibson. Drake May still runs a little bit himself. Travion Henderson going to have a hard time to give us some ceiling weeks consistently. Zach Charbonnet wasn't 100% healthy the entire year so far. Obviously, he's vulturing touchdowns and touches away from Kenneth Walker. Does he see enough volume to still be fantasy relevant? Yes. Is he somebody who's going to be consistent? Probably not. Then Ramondre Stevenson obviously had some fumbling issues a couple weeks ago. How does that affect his role rest of season? Isaiah Pacheco, still highly inefficient, had a decent week 4, but really haven't seen much from him in like a year. Then Kareem Hunt, who had been the RB1 in Kansas City. Now we're starting to see a little bit more Brashard Smith on 3rd downs. That could hurt Kareem Hunt. And then lastly, Trey Benson. A little bit skewed here, right? He only has one start, but on the season, he's averaging 7.2 fantasy points per game. And then we all saw in week 4 where Amari DiMercato took those late game touches away from him that really could have given him a ceiling game, I guess. Now, I'm not concerned with the overall role of Trey Benson. He's still going to get 15 plus touches a week, but hopefully Amari DiMercato vulturing touchdowns late in games doesn't become something that we see very consistent. But now we go on to the wide receiver position. We'll start off in the hot category once again. Just a reminder, 10 points is the cutoff for wide receivers. Above 10, you're a hit. Below 10, you're a miss. In the hot category, we got Puka Nacua, Rome Odunze, Quentin Johnston, Emeka Egbuka, JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown, George Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams, Cortland Sutton, Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman Jr., DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Zay Flowers, and Juwan Jennings. Now for Puka Nacua at the top of the list, honestly, when Matthew Stafford is healthy, Puka is borderline unstoppable. Like, there's no defense out there that can stop Puka Nacua when Matthew Stafford is absolutely 100% healthy. Then we get Rome Odunze, averaging 17.4 fantasy points per game. He's gone over 10 points in all 4 games this year. He is the clear #1 wide receiver in Chicago. Quentin Johnston, a huge surprise for so many people. There ain't no one out there on earth that expected this from Quentin Johnston to start the 2025 season. He's playing great. Same with Emeka Egbuka. Proud dad moment here. I have loved Egbuka for a long time. We're starting to see why. Then JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Gave some gray hairs to some owners in week 4. He didn't really do anything the entire first half of the ball game. Kind of made up for it late in the game, though, in week 4. Brought him over 10 fantasy points. Then we get Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's averaging 20 fantasy points per game, but he's only hitting 3 of 4. Still really good, but also that kind of tells you that he's a little bit more boom or bust, a super high ceiling for sure. George Pickens with no CeeDee Lamb, he could definitely stay in this hot category. Garrett Wilson needs to be basically the entire passing offense for the New York Jets. Why they don't throw him the football sometimes, I just don't understand. Throw up a 50-50 ball. The kid's more than likely going to bring it down. Then Deebo Samuel in Washington. Obviously, with Terry McLaurin not healthy, Deebo could definitely continue to stay in this hot category. Devontae Adams hasn't been fully healthy either, however, continues to stay hot. And this kind of goes back to the Matthew Stafford effect, right? When he's healthy, his receivers are just so good. Then we get Cortland Sutton in Denver. Yes, at some points he's probably going to disappear, but more times than not, he's going to give you that safe floor. Keenan Allen, been a surprise to a lot of people in 2025. He's kind of the return of Keenan from 5 years ago. Now, obviously, each and every game we can't expect 60 yards and a touchdown, but still, been one of the most solid wide receiver pickups of the year. Same with Michael Pittman Jr. And with as many weapons as there are to throw to in Indianapolis, Michael Pittman Jr. each and every week is the safest, most reliable option at this point. DK Metcalf had himself a huge play in week 4 there in Ireland, and he's going to remain pretty big play dependent. The only good side to that is DK Metcalf is a big play wide receiver, and Aaron Rodgers will give him opportunities. Then Justin Jefferson, he's once again producing with yet another quarterback throwing him the football. Zay Flowers, really hoping that Lamar Jackson is good to go, because if Lamar misses, Zay is probably going to start to fall down this list. Then we get Juwan Jennings in San Francisco. He has missed a game, but he has hit over 10 fantasy points in 2 of the 3 games he's played this year. However, his floor is crazy low because he's averaging only 8.5 fantasy points per game. Now with Brock Purdy back and healthy, maybe that comes up here just a little bit, especially since Ricky Pearsall himself is not 100%. But all right, now let's transition down to the mid-tier guys here, where we have Trey Tucker, Romeo Doubs, Nico Collins, Ricky Pearsall, Tyquan Thornton, Marvin Harrison Jr., Khalil Shakir, Jalen Waddle, Marquise Hollywood Brown, and Alec Ayomanor. Now for Trey Tucker, he's going to remain boom or bust, like he always has been. A lot of people saw the big blow-up game in week 3, and they thought that he was just going to be like the second coming of Megatron in their fantasy lineups. No, it's going to be hit or miss. Romeo Doubs is next. He's going on a bye week in week 5, but he may be the safest Green Bay wide receiver rest of season. Nico Collins in here as well. Just hasn't had a consistent high ceiling this year, as of yet anyway. But his floor has been absolutely fine for the last 3 weeks, so he hasn't really killed a lot of his fantasy owners. Ricky Pearsall, we've seen his ceiling quite a few times here already in 2025. He's hit in 2 of his 4 games. Now he's a little bit banged up. Tyquan Thornton has filled in great with the absence of Xavier Worthy earlier in the season for Kansas City. That could slowly start disappearing though with the health of Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice coming back. Marvin Harrison Jr., Sometimes they want to throw him the football, sometimes they don't, sometimes he wants to catch it, sometimes he doesn't. When I think about Marvin Harrison Jr. right here in this mid category, 50% of the time, boom or bust, that's kind of where I think he stays. Then Khalil Shakir in Buffalo, there's just so many weapons to throw to in Buffalo, it's hard to be a consistent hot performer there. Then we have Jalen Waddle, his role could definitely increase with the injury of Tyreek Hill, he could creep up here for sure. Marquise Hollywood Brown, probably going to start taking a little bit more of a backseat with Tyquan Thornton being involved, Xavier Worthy getting healthy, and Rashee Rice right around the corner. We probably don't see ceiling games from Hollywood Brown very often. And then Alec Eomanor, the most consistent wide receiver in Tennessee. Now, unfortunately, it's Tennessee, and they don't get a whole lot of touchdown opportunities, otherwise his ceiling would be a little bit higher, but because they don't score, he's probably going to stay in this mid-tier category most of the season. Which then takes us to the cold category for the wide receiver position, and it is like a Christmas list of names. There are a ton of names. I'm trying to get through it here without passing out due to lack of oxygen. Jamar Chase, Drake London, Wan'Dale Robinson, Teteroa McMillan, Chris Olave, Jacoby Myers, Keon Coleman, Rashid Shaheed, Jamison Williams, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Smith, Kevontae Turpin, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cedric Tillman, A.J. Brown, Kayshon Boutte, Ladd McConkey, T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp, Rashad Bateman, Brian Thomas Jr., Terry McLaurin, Jerry Jeudy, Matthew Golden, Calvin Ridley, Josh Downs, and Travis Hunter. Now, these are all guys who have just straight underperformed for the most part in 2025. Jamar Chase, obviously due to not having Joe Burrow, and Jake Browning can't seem to find him down the field. Drake London, I feel like Drake London is starting to turn things around. Don't forget, he suffered a shoulder injury earlier in the year. He's just now getting back to full health, and we really saw him explode in week 4. Hopefully he can start to make a run here in the mid part of the season. Then after him, we got Wan'Dale Robinson of the Giants. Now with Jackson Dart and no Malik Neighbors, he has an opportunity to at least move up this list a little bit. Teteroa McMillan has not been 100% healthy, and Carolina's offense has struggled. Then we got Chris Olave. He's seen a ton of targets, but they just can't find the end zone in New Orleans. Jacoby Myers kind of just having volume taken away by other guys, right? A big week from Brock Bowers to start the season. A big Trey Tucker week, a big Ashton Genty week. Hasn't really been a big Jacoby Myers week just yet. Then we got Keon Coleman in Buffalo. Like I said, he's splitting with so many people, it's hard to say he's going to be consistent at any point. Then Rashid Shaheed, the same thing goes for him that goes for Chris Olave. Jamison Williams, a little bit more boomer bust. I think we already know that. He needs those deep balls weekly to really produce. DJ Moore, not getting anything down the field, barely even averaging 10 yards per reception. They paid him a ton of money, and they're not even hardly using him. Then Stephon Diggs, you're starting to see with Stephon Diggs, though, he's getting more and more opportunity in this offense. Each week, his targets are increasing, and he has a chance to start performing a little bit better. Devontae Smith in Philadelphia. We're not surprised, right? I mean, this is kind of what the Philadelphia passing offense is. When we talked about Jalen Hurts, remember I said 3 of the 4 games he's played this year, he has less than 155 yards passing. Devontae Smith has struggled. Kevontae Turpin in a bigger role with CeeDee Lamb gone, Dallas still isn't committing enough volume for him to be considered safe each and every week. Juju Smith-Schuster, he'll start losing work with Xavier Worthy coming back, with Rashee Rice right around the corner, with Hollywood Brown still there as well. Cedric Tillman, he just suffered a hamstring injury. How long does he miss? A.J. Brown, Mr. Boomer Bust himself. Now, do you remember this offseason where I said every single year A.J. Brown has 4 games that really make up like 40% of his season-long scoring? He's on pace to do that yet again in 2025. Kayshon Boutte is on the field over 75% of the offensive snaps, but cannot seem to get targets. Then Ladd McConkey, a huge disappointment. It's not a Ladd problem, it's an overall offensive problem. They have too many weapons that are producing. Guys like Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, now Morion Hampton. How about the rookie Oronde Gadsden at the tight end position as well? It's just really taken away the safety of Ladd McConkey. T. Higgins, he's suffering from Jake Browning being the quarterback once again. Cooper Kupp, a little bit more of a move the chains type guy. Somebody that's going to help extend a drive, but he's not going to see consistent volume. Same thing with Rashad Bateman. He'll get a couple shots down the field every once in a while, but what's going to happen to him if Lamar Jackson does miss some time? Then we got Brian Thomas Jr. He has yet to have a game this year over 10 fantasy points. We are a month into the season. If you're not panicking, you probably should be panicking. Terry McLaurin, he hasn't gone over 10 fantasy points, but at least he's injured and has somewhat of an excuse. Jerry Jeudy, not getting enough volume in Cleveland. Now all of a sudden we're going to start having a quarterback controversy. I have a feeling that Joe Flacco is going to, be a rotating door with Dylan Gabriel. Maybe we see Shedeur Sanders. Who knows? It's a nightmare in Cleveland. Matthew Golden in Green Bay. Week 4 was a chance for him to be a breakout stud against Dallas. And then he had that big play to start the game, and a lot of people, myself included, thought we were in line for a huge Matthew Golden day, and we barely saw him the rest of the game against one of the NFL's worst defenses, the Dallas Cowboys. And once again, this just speaks to the fact that there are so many weapons in Green Bay, it's really hard to stay consistent. Then Calvin Ridley. How crazy is it that Calvin Ridley was better with Mason Rudolph last year than he is with Cam Ward this year? Now, after him is Josh Downs. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more Michael Pittman in Indianapolis, and then Travis Hunter. Been a huge disappointment. However, I'm not entirely giving up on Travis Hunter just yet. Now, do I want to start him right now? No, absolutely not. But do I want to drop him? I would really prefer to leave him on the bottom of my bench because I still believe he has the potential upside to turn it around as the season progresses. But that gets us through wide receivers. So now let's go to tight ends. Tight ends, we don't expect 10 points to be a hit or a miss. For the tight end position, because it's a wasteland for the most part, we only expect 8 fantasy points for a tight end. Anything over 8 is considered a hit. Under 8 is considered a miss. In the hot category, we got Darren Waller, we'll talk about him in a second, Trey McBride, Hunter Henry, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren, Juwan Johnson, and Dallas Goedert. Now, Darren Waller obviously has only played one game, and he scored 16.2 fantasy points. And I don't want to overhype a player, but in a game in which they lost their best receiver, Tyreek Hill, Darren Waller looked pretty good, and now all of a sudden, whatever his role was going to be, it could be more. Remember what we saw from Jonnu Smith last year in Miami, and then they let Jonnu go so they could sign Darren Waller out of retirement, and now, all of a sudden, he looks like he could fill a similar role to what we saw from Jonnu last year. It's definitely going to be intriguing to see where he goes in the next few weeks. Then we got Trey McBride. He's gone over 8 fantasy points in all 4 of his games this year. Not a huge surprise, the number 1 guy in Arizona. After him is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. He's had some big games already to start this season. He's been probably the most consistent producer in the New England offense outside of the running back position. Jake Ferguson getting so many targets with no CeeDee Lamb. This could definitely continue for the next few weeks. Dalton Kincaid. I really want to believe in Dalton Kincaid, but like we've already said multiple times in this show, there are just so many weapons in Buffalo, but it's not just that. They have a lead so often, they don't always have to throw the ball for all 4 quarters. However, so far in this young season, Dalton Kincaid continues to find his way above that 8 fantasy points per game, right now averaging 10.7. Then we have Tucker Kraft, who is a big play waiting to happen. He would probably be even higher on this list if it wasn't for like 6 inches in week 4. Dude crashed into the pylon for a touchdown but was down just before the line. Tyler Warren has been pretty safe and consistent in Indianapolis. Juwan Johnson still on the field all the time, and the Saints are always losing. The production wasn't there last week, dropped him below that 100% mark on the season. And then finally, Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia. Honestly, the only consistent producer in the Philadelphia passing game. Now, he has missed 1 game this season, but he's averaging 11.8 fantasy points on the year. He's been great when he's been on the field. But all right, now we go down to the midsection here. We got Kyle Pitts, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce, Jake Tonjes, and A.J. Barner. Now, these guys have gone over 8 fantasy points in 2 of the 4 games this year. Kyle Pitts, honestly, I'm okay with Kyle Pitts right this second. He's averaging 9.1 fantasy points per game. The biggest concern for me here is the play of Michael Penix. The lack of his consistency is really the only thing right now holding Kyle Pitts back from being up in that hot category. Zach Ertz, he should be more involved in this offense with the return of Jaden Daniels. He really wasn't with Marcus Mariota. Travis Kelce, he'll probably take more of a backseat in this passing game in the coming weeks due to Rashee Rice coming back. Jake Tonjes has been a huge surprise for a lot of people after the injury to George Kittle. Now, he isn't an absolute must start each and every week, but in decent matchups, I don't mind it. And then A.J. Barner in Seattle. He may start losing some of his looks to Elijah Arroyo, who last week saw a season high in offensive snaps played and in targets. But all right, now let's go to the cold tight end section where we got some big names in here. We got Brock Bowers, Mark Andrews, Brenton Strange, Sam Laporta, Harold Fannin, TJ Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith, Tommy Tremble, Chig Okonkwo, Mason Taylor, Dalton Schultz, David Njoku, Pat Freiermuth, Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee, and Cade Otton. Now at the top, everyone sees Brock Bowers. And a lot of people are freaking out about Brock Bowers, but he cannot be 100% healthy as of right now. He's not getting anything down the field. Everything is short and underneath and not racking up fantasy points. Mark Andrews has been boom or bust for what feels like years at this point. When he has a really good game, he has a really good game. Other than that, though, it's very disgusting. Then especially now we add on top the injury to Lamar Jackson. Could be very boomer bust in the coming weeks. Then we get Brenton Strange in Jacksonville. How crazy is it that he's outproducing Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter? Then we get Sam Laporta in Detroit with Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown in that running game, soaking up so many touchdowns. It's really hurting Sam Laporta as of right now. Harold Fannin started off the season hot, getting a ton of volume. Now all of a sudden, the volume he's getting, not all of it is catchable, and it's not down the field at all. Now, after him, we got TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. We were hoping that Carson Wentz would be the savior of the TJ Hawkinson season, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case either. Jonnu Smith in Pittsburgh kind of been underperforming after the first week of the season as well. Maybe the injury to Calvin Austin opens up a little bit more opportunity to Jonnu Smith. Tommy Tremble in Carolina, nobody really cares about Tommy Tremble. We all know that the Carolina offense has been pretty inept as of late. Chig Okonkwo, same thing in Tennessee, they just don't score touchdowns. Mason Taylor. This is a name we need to pay attention to in the cold section. We talked about him a lot this offseason, and now all of a sudden the last 2 weeks of the season, he's starting to get more and more involved in the passing game. Now, he may not be one of those guys averaging 10 fantasy points per game and up inside the hot category, but he could replace an underperforming stud here in the coming weeks. But after him, we got Dalton Schultz in Houston, really not getting enough volume to be anything in fantasy football just yet. David Njoku has been a huge disappointment in this offense. They cannot find him down the field, and the overall Cleveland offense just cannot score points. Pat Freiermuth, really an afterthought in the Pittsburgh offense. Evan Ingram, been a huge disappointment, been injured most of the time. But with the play of Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, and now Marvin Mims is popping off as well with the running backs in the backfield, it's hard to find consistent volume going the way of Evan Ingram. Tyler Higbee, with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams eating up everything on the outside, not going to see a whole lot consistently from Tyler Higbee, and then Cade Otton. The fact that Cade Otton didn't get a bigger opportunity last week in Chris Godwin's first game with no Mike Evans leads me to believe he's not going to get much of an opportunity this entire season. All right, so there you have your trending players through 4 weeks of the NFL season. I know there's a lot of underperforming studs out there. I know there's a lot of guys out there producing that we didn't expect them to produce. But that's why we're going through this show every single week. We're trying to identify those trends. Find those players that hit the most consistently. Try to avoid those landmine players that only have blow-up games. Because to quote the great Ron Burgundy, 70% of the time, it works every time.